I didn't expect Rowan's door to swing open that quickly. I'd barely finished raising my hand to knock when he pulled it wide, leaning half into the frame like he'd been waiting just inches behind it. The late afternoon sun hit his bare shoulders first, warm, golden, almost unreal, and for a second I forgot why I was there. Elias, he breathed out like my name was a relief. I swallowed. You said it was urgent. He stepped back to let me in. It's not life-threatening urgent. Just can't reach it myself urgent. I walked into his apartment, trying not to stare too openly. I hadn't seen Rowan without a shirt in years, not since sophomore year, when we were roommates and the walls were thin and he'd walk around in gym shorts, towels slung over one shoulder after showering. Back then I'd trained myself not to look too closely. Now apparently I'd lost that skill. His chest was broader than I remembered, dusted with a soft line of hair down the center. But what caught my attention wasn't the shape of him, it was the irritated patch on the left side of his chest, just above the curve of his rib. Red, scraped, faintly swollen. What happened? I asked, kneeling instinctively to unzip my bag of first aid supplies. Wardrobe malfunction, Rowan said, making a face. They had me wearing this. I don't know, athletic harness. The strap rubbed too hard and then someone yanked it during a pose. It's stupid. So you injured yourself trying to look hot on camera? His ears flushed. I wasn't trying to look hot. I raised an eyebrow. You were doing a fitness shoot. What else would you be trying to look? He gave me that half smile he used to give when we were roommates, the one that never reached his eyes but still softened something in me anyway. Just help me, doctor. I'm not a doctor yet. Still better than me poking at it. He moved toward the couch and I followed. The closeness felt strangely nostalgic, like we'd stepped back into an old rhythm, one we never acknowledged but always fell into effortlessly. He sat, leaning back a little, giving me space to work. I knelt in front of him again, closer this time. Close enough to smell the faint mix of sweat and cedar soap clinging to his skin. Close enough to feel, in the smallest shift of his breathing, the rise and fall of something deeper. Does it hurt? I asked quietly. Only when I touch it, he said. So don't touch it. That's why you're here. I tried to focus on the injury, not him. I soaked a pad with solution and pressed it gently to the irritated area. He hissed through his teeth. Sorry, I murmured. It's fine, he said, but his voice was softer. Almost too soft. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. Not exactly. But it wasn't easy either. It was heavy, like we were both holding pieces of a conversation we weren't ready to say aloud. You didn't have to come all the way here, he said after a moment. I was already on campus, I lied. I wasn't. I'd been halfway through laundry when he texted me a photo of the injury and it, can you help? I'd gotten in my car immediately. Still, he said, eyes flicking down to me then away. I appreciate it. I nodded, focusing on cleaning the edges of the scrape. My fingers brushed his skin lightly, lighter than necessary probably, and I felt him tense, then force himself to relax again. Something electric pulsed in the tiny movement. I hoped I imagined it. You okay? I asked. He gave a small laugh. Just cold hands. My hands aren't cold. He didn't answer. Just looked at me. Really looked. I felt the air tighten. I cleared my throat. This part's probably what's irritating it the most, I said, pointing to the rougher, shorter hairs around the scrape. If it keeps snagging, it'll just get worse. He shifted slightly, leaning in. So, what do you recommend? I can trim it. Clean up the area so it doesn't catch. He blinked. Trim my? Your chest hair, yes. Just around the scrape. Oh. His eyes flickered downward, then back up. Right. Something unsaid passed between us. Something I pretended not to feel and he pretended not to acknowledge. My pulse quickened anyway. I won't do it now, I said, trying to sound casual. Not until the skin settles a bit. Today I just need to clean it. He nodded, exhaling slowly. Okay. I finished cleaning and gently applied the ointment. The angle required me to lean in, and when I did, my knee brushed his shin. Just lightly. Barely anything. But Rowan went still, the kind of stillness that says everything without words. I didn't move away immediately. I didn't have a reason to. You've always had this careful way about you, he said suddenly, voice low. Like you're scared you'll break something. The comment hit harder than it should have. I'm just trying not to hurt you. That's not what I mean. I paused. The room felt too warm. What do you mean? I asked. He opened his mouth, then shut it. He shook his head slightly. It's nothing. Forget it. I didn't push. I never pushed Rowan. That was part of the problem. When I finished, I set the supplies back into my bag. Rowan sat up a little straighter, crossing his arms loosely. The motion drew my eyes unwillingly back to the shape of his shoulders, the familiar but changed outlines of a body I'd always pretended to ignore. "Thanks for coming," he said again, quieter this time. "Of course," I replied. "Anytime." He walked me to the door, and for a moment, neither of us reached for the handle. We just stood there, the small space between us filled with something almost tangible. A breath. A question. A memory we hadn't made yet but already felt the weight of. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. My heart skipped. "Tomorrow? For the shave? If you don't mind." I shook my head. "I don't." His eyes softened in a way that made the room feel smaller. Warmer. More dangerous. "Good," he whispered. I stepped into the hallway and he lingered in the doorway watching me go. I didn't look back, not until I was halfway down the stairs. When I did, he was still there, leaning against the frame, arms loose at his sides, face unreadable except for the faintest curve of a smile. A smile that stayed with me long after his door clicked shut behind him. Rowan opened the door before I even finished knocking. Again. Except this time he didn't bother with a shirt at all. The sight hit me with an embarrassing force, like my heartbeat had slipped and missed a step. He stepped back to let me in, one hand rubbing the side of his neck in a way that felt oddly nervous. "Morning," he said. "It's 2 in the afternoon." He shrugged. "Time is a social construct." I tried to laugh, but my voice stuck halfway out of my chest. He looked different in daylight. Or maybe I just had less emotional armor today. His skin looked softer, somehow, warm, faint freckles scattered across the tops of his shoulders, the faintest flush near the irritated spot on his chest. The redness had spread a little. "You okay?" I asked, nodding toward it. He made a face. "It itched all night. I think I made it worse." "You definitely made it worse," I said, leaning in. "Did you mess with it?" "Define mess." "Rowan." His sheepish grin told me everything. I sighed, dropping my bag on the table. "Sit." "Yes, sir," he joked, but there was something under the joke. A tone. A softness. I pretended not to hear it. He sat on the edge of the couch, watching me unclip the small trimming razor and disinfect it. I could feel his eyes dragging over my hands, my posture, my expression, like he was searching for something I wasn't aware I was giving away. "So," he said lightly, "this is officially the weirdest thing we've ever done. Helping you with an injury is weird?" "Not the injury part." His eyes flicked down to his chest, then to the razor. "The grooming part." I nearly dropped the razor. "It's not grooming," I said, maybe too quickly. "It's just trimming around the irritation so it won't catch." "Still feels intimate," he said under his breath. I froze. Just for a second. He noticed. "Relax," Rowan added, softer now. "I'm just teasing." But the way he watched me, the quiet focus, the searching, felt anything but teasing. I knelt in front of him again. Déjà vu, except today the air felt thicker, warmer. I could feel the heat coming off him. The slight scent of whatever cologne he'd forgotten he was wearing. Not strong, just something warm and woodsy. "Ready?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "Yeah." When I brought the trimmer to his skin, Rowan inhaled sharply. Not from pain, from surprise. His chest rose under my hand, the movement brushing against my fingertips. I paused. "Did that hurt?" He shook his head. "No. Just cold." "It wasn't cold yesterday." He didn't answer. The first few passes were slow, careful. I trimmed away the edges of the hair surrounding the inflamed patch, my thumb brushing lightly against his ribs for balance. He kept his gaze on me the whole time. Not on the razor. Not on the injury. Just me. "You're really gentle," he murmured. I swallowed. "I don't want to hurt you." "There you go again," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" He didn't respond right away. His eyes flickered in a way I couldn't read. Then, "Nothing. Forget it." But I couldn't forget it. Not with the way he'd said it. Not with the way his breath had hitched when my fingers grazed the side of his chest. I shifted closer to get a better angle. My knee brushed the inside of his foot. His leg went still, his muscles tightening, then loosening again as if he were consciously forcing them to relax. "You're tense?" I said before I could stop myself. "Not tense," he said. "Just aware." "Aware." The word dropped into the room like a weight. I pretended to focus on the shaving, but every second felt electric. I could hear the soft buzz of the trimmer, the sound of his breathing, the rhythm of my own heart pushing up into my throat. When I leaned in to inspect the skin more closely, my face hovered inches from his chest. I felt the warmth radiating off him. I felt his breath hit the top of my hair. Then I felt him stop breathing altogether. I looked up, slowly. Rowan's eyes were already on mine. The moment stretched. Not long enough to be inappropriate. Just long enough to be undeniable. I cleared my throat. Almost done. He nodded, swallowing hard. Okay. But neither of us moved right away. When I resumed, his hand brushed mine. Lightly. Maybe an accident. Maybe not. But he didn't pull away. My fingers shook before I could stop them. Sorry, I whispered. For what? I don't know. His voice softened to almost nothing. You don't have to be sorry. Something in my chest tightened. I finished the last careful trim and switched off the trimmer, the sudden silence ringing in the room. Rowan exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding the whole time. When I leaned back, his chest followed mine instinctively, as if his body hadn't gotten the message that the moment was over. I stood too quickly. That should help, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. Rowan touched the newly trimmed area gently with his fingertips. Feels different. Better? Yeah, he said, looking at me again. Better. I packed up the razor, my hands moving faster than necessary. Rowan watched them with that thoughtful intensity one didn't know how to interpret. You're shaking, he murmured. My breath caught. It's nothing. It's not nothing. I didn't look at him. It's just been a long day. He didn't call me out on the lie. He just nodded slowly, eyes lingering on my face like he was memorizing it. You're staying for a bit, right? He asked. I should get going soon. Oh. His voice fell so subtly that if I weren't already listening for the slightest shift in him, I would have missed it. Right. Sure. I picked up my bag. Text me if it starts hurting again. He nodded, but he didn't stand. Just sat there, chest bare, looking strangely vulnerable in a way I'd never seen on him, like I'd peeled back something I didn't mean to touch. I reached the door when he said it. Quiet. Almost lost under the hum of the apartment heater. I missed this. I turned slowly. Missed what? He held my gaze for a long moment. Too long. You, he said. The room felt suddenly too small. My heartbeat too loud. My breath too shallow. Before I could answer, before I could even think, Rowan looked away, running a hand through his hair like he regretted saying it. Forget I said that, he murmured. I'm tired. I don't know what I'm saying. But I knew he did. And he knew I knew. He didn't walk me out this time. He just watched me leave from the couch, eyes following me until the door clicked shut. And the whole way home all I could hear was the echo of his voice, soft and unguarded. You're really gentle. I missed that. Rowan didn't text me until almost noon the next day. Just one message. Can you come by? The irritation spread a little. No emojis. No teasing. Just simple, careful words, which somehow made my stomach drop more than anything flirtatious would have. When I reached his apartment, he opened the door slower this time. He looked tired, but not physically, more like someone who hadn't slept because his thoughts wouldn't leave him alone. His hair was slightly messy, his eyes a little softer, his shoulders relaxed in a way I'd only seen when he was trying not to push someone away. Hey, I said. Hey, he echoed. He stepped back to let me in, and for a second the space between us as I passed felt like walking through thick air, charged, warm, aware. He wasn't shirtless today. Instead, he was wearing a loose, worn gray t-shirt, thin enough that I could see the shape of him beneath it. But the fabric sat lopsided on his chest, like it was irritating him just by touching. It got worse overnight, he said, tugging at the hem anxiously. I tried to ignore it. You're supposed to let it breathe, I replied gently. Not suffocate it in cotton. He huffed a small laugh, the tiniest release of tension, and lifted the shirt enough to show the area. The redness had spread outward, small new patches blooming across his skin. Not dangerous but definitely irritated. I need to shave a cleaner border, I murmured, assessing it. Just around the edges. It'll keep the area from dragging and inflaming again. Yeah, he said quietly. I figured. He didn't meet my eyes, but I could feel something in him winding tighter. Like he was bracing himself for something that hadn't happened yet. Sit, I said softly, gesturing to the couch. He obeyed without a word, unusual for Rowan, who never missed an opportunity to tease or protest. The quiet worried me, but I didn't know how to ask about it without crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross. I gathered the razor and solution again, knelt in front of him just like before. When I reached for the hem of his shirt, he lifted his arms automatically, letting me peel the fabric upward. He didn't take it all the way off. He just held it above his ribs, bunched in his fists, exposing the stretch of skin I needed to work on. Is this okay? I asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. Yeah. I moved closer, close enough that my breath brushed the center of his chest. Close enough to smell the faint warmth of his skin, mixed with soap from a shower he probably rushed through. His stomach tensed for a moment beneath the soft dusting of hair, then eased again. You're nervous, I murmured. He let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Are you surprised? I didn't know how to answer. So I didn't. I started trimming again, careful, slow. Rowan's hands trembled slightly where they held his shirt up. I pretended not to notice. But every time my fingers brushed his skin for balance, his breath caught, and every time he exhaled, it sent a small, unsteady warmth across the back of my wrist. The world outside seemed to go silent. No traffic noise. No hallway creaks. Just the soft hum of the trimmer and Rowan's breathing, uneven, quiet, too aware of every second. At one point, I leaned in to shave a delicate patch near the top of his rib. My other hand rested lightly against the side of his torso, barely any pressure. He inhaled sharply, chest rising into my touch. You okay? I whispered. Yeah, he said. Then quieter, just, don't stop. I froze. Not because of the words, but because of the emotion behind them. Vulnerable. Unfiltered. Like something he'd been holding back had slipped out without permission. Rowan, I started. But I didn't finish. Because that's when it happened. His hand, the one not holding the shirt, lifted slightly, hesitated in the air like he was asking permission from a silence rather than from me. Then, slowly, deliberately, he placed his palm over my wrist. Not to stop me. Not to guide me. Just to hold. Warm skin against warm skin. Gentle. Unassuming. But the minute his fingers curled loosely around my wrist, everything inside me stopped. My breath. My thoughts. My ability to pretend nothing was happening. I looked up. Rowan was already watching me. His eyes weren't wide or startled. They were steady. Searching. Frightened in a quiet, hopeful way that pulled something deep in my chest tight enough to hurt. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Neither did he. The moment stretched out, delicate as a thread, one that might break if we said too much or too little. I felt the weight of his hand, the softness of his grip, the warmth traveling up my arm like a question waiting for an answer I didn't know how to give. Finally, Rowan blinked. Just once. Slow. Then he let go. Not quickly, not like a retreat, but like he thought he should, not like he wanted to. I'm sorry, he murmured, though he sounded anything but certain. You don't have to apologize, I managed to say. Maybe I do, he whispered. The silence that followed was thick with everything we weren't saying. I finished the trim with trembling hands, afraid to break the fragile air between us. When I shut the trimmer off, Rowan lowered his shirt but didn't pull it down fully. It pooled around his stomach, forgotten, as he looked at me with an expression that made my heartbeat twist. I sat back on my heels. He slid forward instinctively, closing the small gap between us. Our knees brushed. Neither of us moved away. Thank you, he said softly. For helping. For being here. His words landed too heavily to be casual. We sat like that for a long time, knees touching, his shirt rumpled between his hands, my breath still unsteady. The space between us felt alive, pulsing with something I was terrified to name. Then Rowan lifted a hand again, slower than before, and reached toward my face. His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair off my forehead, tucking it behind my ear with a gentleness that made my entire body go still. It wasn't a teasing gesture. It wasn't playful. It was intentional. Soft. Careful. Real. I froze exactly the way he had the moment I touched his skin yesterday. He must have seen it, the way my breath hitched, the way my shoulders rose. His hand hovered for a second near my cheek as if waiting for me to lean into it. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. He lowered it slowly, his fingers brushing the air between us. The world didn't move. Neither did we. And the moment hung there, fragile, trembling, like the pause before a confession neither of us was ready to make. I didn't sleep much after leaving Rowan's apartment. Not because anything dramatic had happened, but because everything subtle had. His hand on my wrist. His fingers brushing my hair back. The way he'd looked at me like he already knew the truth I kept trying to swallow. By morning, my thoughts were tangled so tightly I couldn't tell fear from longing. When Rowan texted mid-afternoon, it was short. Can you come by? Just want to talk. My pulse stuttered. I answered before hesitation could catch up with me. I'm on my way. He opened the door before I knocked. Again, but this time he stepped back immediately, giving me space like he knew I needed to arrive on my own terms. His hair was still damp from a shower, curling slightly at the ends. He wore a soft, oversized hoodie despite the warm weather, like he needed the comfort of it. His eyes, they gave him away. Too soft, too hopeful, too scared. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." He moved aside and I walked in. The living room felt dimmer than usual, blinds half drawn, a slant of evening gold cutting through the space between us. He didn't sit. Neither did I. For a moment, the silence pressed at my ribs. Then Rowan exhaled shakily. "Okay. I'm just gonna say this before I lose the nerve." My whole body tensed. He rubbed his palms against his jeans, pacing once, then stopping directly in front of me. "These last few days, they felt different," he said. "I mean, everything with you has always felt a little different. But lately it's like," he broke off, "like I'm noticing things I shouldn't notice." I forced a breath in. "Like what?" He gave me a look that told me he wasn't laughing anymore. "Like the way you breathe when you're concentrating. Or how gentle your hands are when you touch me. Or how my chest does this stupid flutter thing every time you look at me longer than a second." My pulse hammered in my throat. "Rowan." "No, let me finish," he said quickly, lifting a hand as if he needed to physically hold back his own fear. "I know this is a lot. And if I'm reading everything wrong, just say the word and I'll drop it. We'll go back to how things were. I'll never make it weird again." The panic in his voice made something inside me ache. "I don't want things to go back," I said before I could think better of it. He froze. I froze. The air between us tightened like a pulled thread. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay then. I need to ask you something honestly." His voice was trembling. Rowan never trembled. He stepped closer, slow enough that I could step back if I needed to. I didn't. My feet felt rooted to the floor. "Elias," he said so quietly it almost didn't reach me, "when I touched your wrist yesterday, did I imagine it? That pause you made? That look in your eyes?" My chest tightened painfully. "You didn't imagine it." He took in a breath like I'd just handed him something breakable. "Then why didn't you pull away?" he asked. My voice came out soft, honest, terrified. "Because I didn't want to." The room went silent. Completely. Even the distant noise from the street outside faded. Rowan stared at me like he didn't know what world he was in anymore. He whispered, "I thought maybe I wanted too much." I shook my head. "You didn't? You don't. Then what am I allowed to want?" he asked. And it wasn't playful. It wasn't teasing. It was raw. Vulnerable. Like the answer mattered more than anything else in his life. My breath hitched. "I don't know what I'm ready for. I don't know what this is or how to define it. But, you're not the only one who's been feeling something." His shoulders shook with a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He took one more step, closing the distance so there was barely a foot between us. "Then why do you look like you're about to run?" "Because I'm scared," I whispered. Rowan's voice softened further. "Tell me of what?" "Of messing everything up," I said. "Of wanting something I shouldn't. Of you waking up one day and regretting this. Of me saying yes to something I've spent years pretending I didn't want." His lips parted slightly. His eyes flicked over my face, searching again but gentler this time, not for answers but for permission. "Elias," he murmured, "what if I said I don't regret anything? What if I've wanted this longer than you think?" My heart stumbled. I shook my head lightly. "You can't just say things like that." "I'm not just saying them." He lifted his hand, slowly so slowly, and hovered it near my jaw. "Tell me to stop." I didn't. I couldn't. His fingertips touched my skin like he thought I might shatter. My breath faltered. His palm rested lightly against my cheek, warm and steady. I leaned into it without meaning to. His eyes softened instantly, like he'd been waiting for that single unconscious movement for years. "God," he whispered, "I've wanted to do that since college." My throat tightened. "Rowan." He stepped close enough that our chests almost touched but not quite. Like he was giving me every chance to walk away. "I'm not going to rush you," he said. "I just need you to know I'm not confused. I'm not experimenting. I'm not drunk on attention. I know what this is for me." I swallowed hard. "And what is it?" He kissed my forehead. Not my lips. Not anything bold. Just the softest, slowest, most heartbreaking kiss to the center of my forehead. "A chance," he whispered against my skin. "A chance I've wanted with you for a long time." Something inside me cracked open, not painful, but releasing something I didn't even know I'd been holding tightly. I felt my hand lift, almost without permission, resting lightly on his chest over the freshly shaved area. His breath caught, not in pain, but in something warmer. When I didn't move away, he lowered his forehead until it touched mine. Our breaths mingled. The world shrank to the quiet space between us. If I kissed you, he murmured, would you hate me for it? My voice barely existed. No. Would you panic? Probably. Would you stop me? I closed my eyes. I don't think I could. That was enough. He inched forward, giving me every second to change my mind. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, thumb brushing the edge of my hairline. My fingers curled lightly into his hoodie, more instinct than intention. Our lips touched, barely. Not a real kiss. Not yet. Just a trembling brush, like testing the temperature of a fragile moment. He didn't push. He didn't deepen it. He just stayed there, breathing softly against my mouth. I felt something shift, a settling, a recognition, a quiet yes rising from somewhere deep inside me. When we finally pulled back, he didn't speak. Neither did I. He rested his forehead against mine again. You're shaking, he whispered. So are you, I murmured. His quiet laugh was breathless. I guess we're both terrified. I nodded, eyes still closed. Terrified, but not running. His thumb traced my jaw gently. Good. Stay with me a little longer? I opened my eyes. His were right there, vulnerable, sincere, waiting. And for the first time in years, the answer didn't scare me. I'm here, I said. I'm not going anywhere. The warmth that bloomed in his expression nearly undone me. We didn't kiss again. We didn't need to. We just stayed standing there, held together by something softer than gravity, stronger than fear. Something new. Something fragile. Something real enough to make my chest shake. And for the first time, the question echoing in my head wasn't what if this ruins everything? It was, what if I said yes? Rowan didn't let go of me for a long time. Not in a possessive way. Not in a now everything's different way. More like he was afraid that if he stepped back too soon, the moment would dissolve, and we'd both pretend it hadn't happened. His forehead was still resting against mine when he finally whispered, we should probably sit. Or breathe. Or something. I huffed out a tiny laugh. Breathing would be good. He pulled back just enough to look at me. You okay? I think so. You think? I'm processing. That's fair. He nodded softly and touched my wrist, gentle, grounding, familiar in a way that was new all over again. Come on. He led me to the couch, but instead of sitting close like he usually did, he left a deliberate bit of space between us. Respectful. Careful. It struck me hard that Rowan wasn't assuming anything had been decided. He was giving me room to rethink every second. He braced his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. For once, he didn't seem to know what to do with them. Elias, he said slowly, I meant what I said earlier. I don't regret any of this. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. But I need to know where your head is. A deep breath worked its way out of me. It's messy. He nodded. I figured. Not in a bad way. I rubbed my palms together. Just new. Rowan leaned back slightly, giving me his full attention. I'm not expecting you to know everything right now. Or anything really. But I want to be clear about something. Okay. His eyes found mine, steady, soft, unbearably sincere. I'm not in a rush. I don't want to push you. And I don't want you to pretend you're ready for something if you're not. But I do want to, explore this. At whatever speed you want. My pulse skipped. And if I don't know the speed? I asked. He smiled, small, patient. Then I'll match you. The simplicity of that undid me a little. I exhaled and leaned back into the couch, staring at my hands. I'm scared of messing up. Of hurting you. Or me. Or both of us. That's a fair fear, he said, scooting a little closer, but not touching. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere just because you're nervous. I'm more than nervous, I admitted. I know. His voice gentled. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Did the kiss scare you because it happened, or because you wanted it to happen? I closed my eyes briefly. Because I wanted it. Rowan's exhale was almost a sigh of relief. Okay, he murmured. That helps. He didn't touch me. Maybe he was afraid he'd pushed too far too fast. Maybe he was waiting for me to make the next move. The problem was I didn't know how. So Rowan filled the silence. What I want, he said, is just honesty. If you need space, tell me. If you need closeness, tell me. If you want to take it day by day, we can do that. If you want to pretend none of this happened. I don't. He paused, surprised. You don't? I shook my head, staring at the floor because looking at him felt too much. I don't want to rewind. I don't know how to move forward without tripping over everything. He shifted closer, slow enough that I could see each inch of the movement. What if moving forward just looks like trying? I smiled weakly. That's not a plan. It's a start. I risked looking at him then. His expression was open, hopeful in a quiet way that twisted something inside me. So what does trying look like? I asked. Rowan tilted his head. We could talk more. Be honest more. Maybe spend time together without dancing around everything. Maybe hold hands if you want. Or not. We can take it slow. You're being very reasonable. He huffed a soft laugh. I'm trying not to scare you off. That's not going to happen. His eyebrows lifted. No. No. A silence settled, warm this time, not tense. Rowan shifted his weight and in a barely audible voice he said, Can I ask what you want? Not in 5 years. Not next month. Just right now. I swallowed hard. My answer appeared before I could overthink it. I want you closer, I whispered. Rowan didn't move immediately. He waited, eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. When he found none, he slid closer until our legs brushed. My breath hitched. He lifted a hand, slow again, and rested it lightly on my knee. Too much, he asked. No, I said quickly. Not too much. His shoulders relaxed. We sat like that for a while. Not talking. Not pushing. Just letting the closeness settle into something familiar instead of terrifying. At some point, Rowan spoke again, voice low. You know, the truth is I've been scared too. I blinked. Really? You think you're the only one falling apart over this? He said with a soft laugh. I've been trying to hide how I feel for months. Maybe longer. I didn't want to ruin what we had. And now. His thumb brushed gently over my knee. Now I think keeping quiet would have been the bigger mistake. I let his words linger, sinking into me. What if, I began slowly, we just take the next week or so and see how things feel? No labels. No expectations. Just us. Trying. Rowan smiled, a real one this time, bright and genuine. I can do that, he said. Easily. And if I freak out, I added, you'll tell me, right? If I start pulling away or shutting down? Of course, he said. We're not doing the silent confusion thing anymore. Deal? Deal. He squeezed my knee gently, a grounding point I didn't know I needed until it was there. And Elias? He added. Yeah. His voice went soft again. You can touch me too, you know. You don't have to wait for me to start everything. He crawled up my neck. I know. I'll try. You already are, he said, glancing meaningfully at where my hand had somehow ended up resting near his. You just don't notice it. Self-conscious, I started to pull back, but he caught my fingers lightly, barely a hold, more like a suggestion, and that small connection steadied something in me. We laced our fingers together without any fanfare, without a dramatic moment. Just two people who had run out of reasons not to. Rowan looked down at our hands and smiled quietly to himself. This feels like the right direction, he murmured. Yeah, I agreed. It does. We stayed like that, quiet, close, learning each other all over again, until dusk settled fully and the city lights blinked awake outside the window. There was no plan. No promises. No declarations. Just a question we were finally brave enough to start answering. Where do we go from here? Forward. Together. Slowly. Honestly. And for the first time, the unknown didn't feel like a threat. It felt like hope. I woke before Rowan did. For a minute, I didn't understand why everything felt so quiet. Not silent. Just easy, like the air had finally stopped bracing itself around us. Morning light spilled through the blinds in thin strips, warming the floor and the blanket pooled around my waist. I stretched, slow and careful, and that's when I noticed him. Rowan was asleep on the far end of the couch, turned toward me. Sometime during the night, we must have drifted apart and back together, the way people do when they're trying not to admit they want to stay close. His hand was resting just a few inches from mine, close enough to be intentional, far enough to give me space. I studied his face, softened by sleep. The tension he carried yesterday, fear, hope, vulnerability, had smoothed into something peaceful. He looked younger like this, unguarded. I didn't realize I was smiling until I felt it tug at my lips. The realization washed over me gently, like a tide coming in. Something changed. Something real. And I'm not scared of it. I shifted slightly and his eyelashes fluttered. His eyes opened slowly, hazy with sleep, and he blinked up at me like he needed a second to remember where he was, and who he was with. Then the memory hit him and a soft, shy smile crept across his face. Morning, he murmured, voice rough. Hey, I whispered, my own voice barely there. He pushed himself upright, rubbing at his eyes. Did I kick you in my sleep or anything? No, I said, laughing gently. You were weirdly respectful of my personal space. Damn, he said. Guess I need to try harder next time. He said it lightly, teasing, but it sent a warm ripple through me anyway. Rowan stretched his arms overhead, groaning a little, and the hem of his t-shirt lifted just enough for me to look away way too quickly. He caught the motion, of course. His smile twitched. You okay? He asked. I nodded, clearing my throat. Just awake. Good, he said softly. I like you awake. He didn't move closer, not yet, but his voice did. It settled somewhere deep in my chest, gentle and sure. After a beat, he got up and padded toward the kitchen. You want coffee? Always. He started the machine, humming under his breath. It should have felt normal, this mundane little ritual, but something in the air had shifted. The space between us wasn't charged like it had been before. It wasn't tense or uncertain. It was warm now. Lived in. Like waking up after a storm and finding everything washed clean. Rowan handed me a mug, our fingers brushing. Before, I might have flinched at the contact or pretended not to notice. Now, I let the touch linger a fraction longer than necessary. He noticed. His eyes softened, like he wasn't expecting me to give him anything without hesitation. We ended up standing there, facing each other with steaming mugs and sleepy smiles, caught in a quiet that didn't ask us to fill it. So, he said after a moment, does today feel weird? Different? I took a slow breath. Different? But not in a bad way. He nodded. Me too. We moved toward the window, leaning against the counter side by side. He didn't reach for my hand this time, not out of fear but out of respect, waiting for me to decide what this morning meant. And for once I didn't overthink it. I shifted my mug into my left hand and with my right I slid my fingers toward his. Not grabbing. Just offering. Rowan's breath hitched. He looked down, then at me, something bright and fragile blooming behind his eyes. He took my hand lightly, like he was afraid he might break whatever was forming between us. Yeah, he whispered, eyes flicking between our fingers and my face. Okay. That feels right. I felt my cheeks warm, but I didn't let go. Good. He squeezed my hand, barely there, then leaned his shoulder against mine. Do you want to do something today? Go somewhere? Stay in? I don't know what the rules are yet. We kind of said there wouldn't be rules, I reminded him. True. He grinned. Then I guess we get to make them up. I laughed softly. I'm not really in a rules-making mood. Then how about this, he said carefully. We stay close. We talk. We don't pretend yesterday didn't happen. And when something feels too big, we say so. That's a lot of rules for someone not making rules. He bumped my shoulder. Okay, fine. One rule, we don't hide. I let that settle. Hiding, it was what I'd done for so long I barely knew where the habit ended and I began. But standing there with Rowan's hand in mine, morning light painting us in soft gold, I didn't want to hide. Not from him. Not from this. No hiding, I agreed quietly. We stood there a while, swaying slightly, fingertips brushing, hands warm around each other's. The city outside moved on like it always did, unaware that everything inside this small apartment had shifted. Rowan turned toward me, his voice low and careful. Elias. Yeah. He hesitated just long enough to make my heartbeat stutter. I'm really glad you're here. With me. Like this. A breath left me, soft, steady, certain. Me too, I said. And I meant it. No panic. No second guessing. No storm. Just the beginning of something real, blooming quietly between us. Something that felt like the first morning of a life I never believed I'd get to have. And as Rowan's thumb brushed slowly against my hand, stealing a tiny smile out of me, I knew. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the first real page.